Hey guys, welcome to another movie review. Today I'm talking about the latest Transformers movie, and what's kind of unique about this movie is it's both a reboot of the franchise and it's also kind of a continuation of, I believe, the 2018 film Bumblebee, which came out a couple years ago, obviously. And it's just one of those things where there's been talks over the years of a Bumblebee 2, and Paramount Pictures has wanted to reboot Transformers for a while. They know a lot of people were kind of upset with where Michael Bay took the franchise and stuff, so they kind of wanted a fresh new face. But and Stephen Caple Jr., who directed Creed 2 a couple years back as well, to kind of helm this movie, to kind of give it a fresh take and things like that. So, like I said, this is both a reboot of Transformers while also being a continuation of Bumblebee, which happened to come out a couple years ago as well. But in this movie, though, you guys, basically the Transformers, they have to go after this artifact that um, the Beast Transformers, also known as the Primals in this movie, that are also introduced to this franchise. For those who might remember, there was a Transformers spin-off show back in the day called Beast Wars, which were kind of more like beast-like Transformers. They didn't really look like a car or a helicopter or anything like a regular Transformer would turn into. So basically, these Beast Transformers and the regular Transformers have to go after this artifact. Their Unicron, who's kind of a big Transformers villain, basically is trying to go after this thing called the Port Key. And the reason why the Transformers want it so bad is because they could bring back their home planet if they successfully get it. And obviously, Unicron wants it because he's eater of planets, and so basically, if he gets a hold of it, he could basically eat Earth and eat several other planets and stick around for longer. Because if he doesn't eat planets, he can't live as long as he hopes to. And so over the course of this movie too, we get to meet some human characters that also help the Transformers track down the port key. There's a character that was kind of ex-military, taking care of his brother, and kind of gets lost in the whole thing. He basically becomes friends with a Transformer that can turn into a car named Mirage. And the female character that's also a lead of the movie, she knows how to read hieroglyphics. She works for a museum. She's able to tell when something is fake or real. She's also able to tell when certain hieroglyphics represent certain things while others represent different things, whether it's from a certain culture or a certain era of history. And so she becomes useful because the Transformers basically need her to basically clarify what certain passwords and certain messages are on certain artifacts to get what basically will be the port key near the end of the movie. And so that's basically what this film is about. It's about this port key and about the Transformers potentially getting their home planet back and making sure it doesn't get into the wrong hands, such as the character of Unicron. But overall, guys, I enjoyed this movie for the most part. I was kind of hoping that Paramount was going to always do that Bumblebee 2 like they were talking about, but unfortunately, they kind of went this route where they rebooted the franchise while also continuing Bumblebee within the movie in some way, shape, or form. It also takes place in the 1990s, which is roughly 10 years after Bumblebee anyway. And so basically, it's just one of those things where rather than kind of going one concrete direction, rather than just going what Travis Knight started in Bumblebee, Paramount decided to basically reboot both things at once. And I don't know if that was exactly the smartest way to go. It was just one of those things where, as you're watching this movie, there's certain things where certain ideas don't feel as full in fruition as they could be. And there's just other things where it's just like, why couldn't they just do a Bumblebee too? But anyway, going over some positives and negatives of this movie as to why I like the movie overall, but where I feel like it's not quite as good as maybe some other Transformers movies like Bumblebee. For my positives of this movie, though, the action scenes are very good. There's actually some pretty good like Transformer moments in particular. Unlike Michael Bay, who basically just moves the camera around a lot, has a hard time. You have a hard time kind of distinguishing who was what on camera. This time around, Stephen Caple Jr. is good about making sure you do see the Transformers action, that you do get to see what exactly is going on with the Transformers over the course of this movie. So I really applaud him for that. So that really is the direction they're going to go in moving forward. I think that's the right direction just because it was kind of irritating to watch those older Transformers movies, not being able to really see what was happening, but to actually, this time around, actually see what's going on in the action scenes and that we actually have good moments with the Transformers rather than just them going after the artifact from getting from the hands of the bad guys. And that goes into my next positive. The character Mirage, who's voiced by Pete Davidson in this movie, very, very funny. Really like this character a lot. I'm not normally a Pete Davidson fan. I think some of his humor is a little flat to me, but in this film in particular, I think the script gave him some really great things to do. He was a very likable character, a very funny character. For the most part, you could tell him and this human character, played by I think Anthony Ramos, I think is the actor's name, that you could tell the two of them were bonding pretty well over the course of this movie. Um, I just really enjoyed this Mirage character. He even has the ability, like what his name suggests, he's able to kind of duplicate what looks like multiple versions of himself, even though it's just one version of himself. And there's just cool abilities like that that he has over the course of this movie that makes for the film to have a little bit more fun to it and be able to have an additional character to the roster that really kind of brings more fun to the franchise too. This film, like I said, does take place in the 1990s, and there's some small 90s references every once in a while that are kind of fun. The main character's younger brother plays a Game Boy in one scene. Bumblebee has audio clips once again playing from the radio or from a movie screen of films that came out in the 80s and 90s that are similar to things that have come out in that era. So there's just small little 90s references. I think even like a character has like a Mighty Morphin Power Rangers shirt on in one scene and stuff. So small little 90s references, something that I can personally, be able to see just because I grew up in the 90s as well. So just kind of fun to see those references over the course of this movie. There's also some pretty decent attempts at characterization. I know Transformers isn't known for deep storytelling or in-depth character development or anything like that, but there is some characterization that I do appreciate. The whole thing with the girl being able to read the hieroglyphics and be able to tell what's a real artifact and what's a fake one. The fact that this other lead character, played by Anthony Ramos, is ex-military, and he has certain things I'm sure from the military that he has knowledge of that helps this movie overall and things like that. So the attempts at characterization I thought were pretty good. There's also this whole thing with the lead character and his younger brother, and he has to be constantly sent to the hospital for this health condition that he has and things like that. So there's things that make you care about what's going on in the story. So the attempts at characterization overall pretty good. Not super in-depth, unfortunately, but I like the attempt that they're doing something with this franchise that Michael Bay wasn't too invested in to begin with. And if it is moving forward that this is what they're going to do with more of their characters, I highly approve of that. And I can't talk about this next one too much because it'd be spoiler territory, but let's just say near the end of the film, right before the credits start rolling, there's something that they might do with this franchise moving forward that would be tying in with something else related to something that Transformers also happens to be involved with that I think could be potentially cool. Without saying exactly what it is, let's just say it is something that has been attempted before in film, and I think it could be cool if done correctly. I think it would definitely have to be a reboot version of what this thing would be, but kind of cool that they are trying to tie it in with the Transformers universe and stuff like that. So kind of a small little thing that they do at the end, where if you catch what this one thing said on it, but it was cool. So without kind of saying exactly what it is, I thought I liked the reference, and I'm kind of intrigued to see what they're going to do with it if they do decide to make more Transformers movies moving forward, and if it is indeed connected with this one thing that they reference. But for my negatives of this movie, though, you guys, this unfortunately is a very weak follow-up to Bumblebee. There's basically just like one or two little mutters of things that happened in Bumblebee that they are continuing forward. Obviously, the Bumblebee character is in this movie, but basically the character that Haley Steinfeld played in that Bumblebee movie, she's basically just referenced once in this movie through conversation, and they're also referenced through conversation again, just another thing that happened in that movie regarding Bumblebee the character. But overall, it really is kind of disappointing that Paramount just decided to do a flat-out reboot rather than just doing a Bumblebee 2 where they happen to have prominent Transformers characters show up throughout the movie and stuff like that. So I really would have preferred a Bumblebee 2, just my preference. But as a follow-up to Bumblebee, the way that it stands now, this unfortunately was kind of a weak follow-up to me. Another negative I have with the movie is, even though there is a lot of Beast Wars things in this movie, for the most part, it's just kind of adding more characters to the roster for the Transformers franchise. So if you're looking for a straight-up Beast Wars movie, I would say this film has Beast Wars characters in it, and it's not necessarily a direct adaptation of that Beast Wars show. So that is kind of a downside, is for Transformers fans that were hoping for a reboot of the franchise in the form of Beast Wars. It doesn't fully commit to that, unfortunately. It's just more so a character choice. So unfortunately, the Beast Wars element, just mostly characters in that department, not really a Beast Wars adaptation per se for this movie. And also, for the most part, there's nothing super interesting for the human characters to do in this movie. Um, it really is mostly the Transformers movie, which is fine. You know, it's a Transformers film, but there really is nothing super interesting for the humans to do. You know, obviously there's this military guy that's gotten in trouble and is taking care of his brother, and then there's this whole thing with this girl being able to read hieroglyphics and stuff. But for the most part, I just really wasn't invested in any of the human stuff in this movie, and I know that's kind of an ongoing issue with Transformers, is the human characters aren't super interesting in this franchise. But for this film in particular, I thought the humans were really not giving super interesting things to do in this movie. And for the most part, Act 3 of this movie I thought had some really sloppy elements. Don't get me wrong, it had some cool elements too, specifically if you're looking for Transformers stuff in a Transformers movie. But there was something with this guy getting a suit in one scene that I was really turned off by. And I just thought the overall finale was just something we've seen in millions of Transformers movies before this movie. It just felt like the same old, get the artifact, stop the bad guy, Transformers win, Optimus Prime gives his big speech at the end, and it's just like we've seen this a million times before. So it's just one of those things where you get to Act 3, there's things you like about it, but there's things in it where you just kind of roll your eyes and be like, oh, we've been down this road before. But so for Transformers Rise of the Beast, I am going to give it an 8 out of 10. I think there's tons of things to admire about this movie. There's tons of great things in it. Stephen Caple Jr. does bring more of a fresh breath of fresh air to the franchise than I think Michael Bay ever would have done for a Transformers movie at this point. Um, but for my negatives, though, like I said, it's just kind of a weak follow-up to Bumblebee. It really is kind of too bad that Paramount couldn't have just chosen a direction rather than just saying, we're going to continue Bumblebee and do Beast Wars at the same time. After seeing the movie, I don't think that was the most wise choice to do for a Transformers movie, but 8 out of 10 for me. I like the movie. I would say if you're a really hardcore Transformers fan, you could probably see it in theaters. I think it's good enough if you're that big into Transformers. If you really haven't been big in Transformers up to this point, probably just wait for streaming on this one. I don't think I can send you to the theater if you're not super into Transformers at this point. So 8 out of 10 for me. I like the movie. Go into this film knowing that there's problems though, but for the most part, I think it's a good film. I think there's definitely some good things about it. 8 out of 10 for me.